Little girl accused of stealing leftovers donates blood to CEO, unaware she's the heir to everything. If you like this story, subscribe to the channel and type love in the comments. And don't forget to tell us where you're watching from. Great news awaits you. The fluorescent lights of St. Mary's General Hospital cast harsh shadows across 7-year-old Amber's dirt-stained face as she pressed her small frame against the cold cafeteria door. Her golden hair, tangled and unwashed for days, caught the sterile light as she watched the kitchen staff scraping leftover food into large trash bins. Her stomach cramped with familiar hunger, a sensation that had become her constant companion since her mother Claire lost her 3rd job this month. "Excuse me, little girl," came a sharp voice from behind her. Amber spun around to face a stern-faced security guard whose badge read, "Patterson." His eyes narrowed as he looked down at her torn sneakers and faded dress. "What exactly do you think you're doing here?" Amber's voice barely rose above a whisper. I was just looking for some food, sir. My mama and I haven't eaten since yesterday, and she told me sometimes hospitals throw away good food that people don't finish. Patterson's expression hardened. "So you're here to steal. Do you have any idea how serious that is? This is theft of hospital property." He grabbed his radio. "Security to cafeteria. We have a situation with a minor attempting to steal food." Tears welled up in Amber's green eyes. "I wasn't stealing. I was just hoping someone might share something they didn't want. My mama is sick at home, and she can't work, and we don't have any money for groceries." "That's what they all say," Patterson scoffed. "Save your sob story for someone who cares. You and your kind think you can just waltz in here and take whatever you want. Well, not on my watch." The commotion drew curious stares from passing nurses and visitors. Amber felt her cheeks burn with shame as their judgmental eyes bore into her. She'd never felt so small, so worthless. The whispers started immediately. "Poor thing. Where are her parents?" Probably one of those street kids. As Patterson reached for his handcuffs, a sudden commotion erupted from the emergency corridor. "Code blue! Code blue! We need type AB negative blood immediately." The urgent voice echoed through the hospital's PA system, followed by the rapid footsteps of medical personnel rushing past them. Through the chaos, Amber caught sight of something that made her forget her own troubles entirely. On a gurney, being wheeled rapidly down the hallway, lay a man who couldn't have been much older than her mother. His usually commanding presence, evident even in his weakened state, was diminished by the pallor of his skin and the oxygen mask covering half his face. This was Marcus Blackwood, though Amber didn't know his name or that he controlled a business empire worth billions. Marcus had built his fortune from nothing, growing up in foster care and clawing his way to success through sheer determination. At 42, he was known throughout the business world as a fair but demanding leader who never forgot his humble beginnings. Today, however, none of that mattered. A rare blood disorder that had claimed his younger brother Thomas 5 years earlier was now threatening to take his life too. "We're running critically low on AB negative," Dr. Williams called out to his team. "The blood bank at Metropolitan General is sending what they have, but it won't arrive for another hour. His levels are dropping fast." Amber watched as the medical team worked frantically around Marcus. Something stirred deep within her chest, a feeling she couldn't quite name. Here was someone who needed help, really needed it, and maybe, just maybe, she could do something useful for once, instead of being seen as a burden or a thief. "Wait!" Amber called out, breaking free from Patterson's grip. "I want to help!" Dr. Williams barely glanced at the small child. "Sweetheart, this isn't a place for children. You need to go back to your parents." "But I want to give him my blood," Amber insisted, her voice growing stronger. "I don't know what type I have, but maybe it's the right kind. Maybe I can help save him." Patterson laughed cruelly. This little thief thinks she can play doctor now. Come on, kid, let's go call your parents and the police. Dr. Williams paused, studying Amber's determined expression. In 15 years of medicine, he'd learned to recognize something special in people, a quality that couldn't be taught or faked. This child had it. How old are you, sweetheart? 7, sir. I know kids usually can't donate blood, but this man looks really sick, and I feel strong today. I had some crackers this morning. Her innocent honesty touched something in the doctor's professional heart. The medical team exchanged glances. It was highly irregular, but they were running out of options. Dr. Williams made a decision that would change everything. Let's at least test her blood type. If she's a match, we might be able to draw a small amount safely, just enough to buy us time until the real supply arrives. Patterson started to protest, but Dr. Williams held up his hand. Officer, this child is volunteering to potentially save a life. I'd say that makes her a hero, not a criminal. 10 minutes later, Amber sat bravely in the lab chair as the technician drew a small vial of her blood for testing. She watched Marcus through the window as nurses continued working to stabilize him. Something about his face seemed familiar, though she was certain she'd never seen him before. This is remarkable, the lab technician whispered to Dr. Williams after running the tests. Not only is she AB negative, but look at these genetic markers. She handed him the printout, her hands trembling slightly. Dr. Williams studied the results, his eyes widening. Are you absolutely certain about this? I've run it 3 times. There's no mistake. This child shares significant genetic markers with the patient. They're related, closely related. This level of similarity suggests. She paused, checking her notes again. This suggests a uncle-niece relationship. The doctor felt his world shift. Marcus Blackwood had no known living relatives except for his deceased brother, Thomas, but the blood work didn't lie. Somehow, this homeless little girl was connected to one of the most powerful families in the city. As the medical team prepared the emergency transfusion, none of them noticed the way the hospital's lights seemed to flicker in a pattern almost like a heartbeat, or how the storm outside suddenly calmed to a gentle rain. Sometimes, the universe has a way of orchestrating encounters that seem too impossible to be mere coincidence. Claire Morrison sat in the cramped waiting room of the county assistance office, bouncing her knee anxiously as she waited for her number to be called. At 38, she carried herself with a dignity that poverty couldn't diminish, though the stress lines around her green eyes told the story of a woman fighting battles on every front. Her golden hair, so similar to her daughter's, was pulled back in a simple ponytail that emphasized the sharp cheekbones that hunger had made more prominent. The intake worker behind the bulletproof glass barely looked up when Claire finally approached. Name? Claire Morrison. I'm here about emergency food assistance and possibly housing aid. My daughter and I have been sleeping in our car for the past week. Employment status? Claire's voice tightened. Recently unemployed. I was working at Riverside Diner until last Tuesday when they closed down unexpectedly. Before that I had 2 part-time jobs, but they cut hours. She didn't mention the medical bills from Amber's bout with pneumonia last winter that had drained their meager savings. Father of the child. The question hit Claire like a physical blow, as it always did. Unknown, she whispered, her cheeks flushing with shame. It was a night 7 years ago that existed in her memory only in fragments, a dimly lit bar, a handsome stranger with kind eyes, too much alcohol, and a connection that felt real until the morning sobered them both. She'd never seen him again, and when she discovered she was pregnant weeks later, she had no way to find him. What Claire didn't know was that the stranger from that night had his own fragmented memories of their encounter. Thomas Blackwood, Marcus's younger brother, had been struggling with his own demons at the time. The pressure of living up to his older brother's success, a failed engagement, and a drinking problem he wouldn't admit. The night he met Claire had been one of his darkest, and while he remembered a beautiful woman with kind eyes who listened to his troubles, the alcohol had stolen the details from both their minds. Thomas had died 3 years later in a car accident, never knowing he had fathered a child. He'd carried a business card from that bar in his wallet until the day he died, though he could never remember why it was important to him. "We can process you for emergency food stamps, but the waiting list for housing assistance is currently 3 months, the intake worker said mechanically. Next. Claire walked out of the building feeling more defeated than when she'd entered. 3 months. They couldn't survive 3 more days in the car, let alone 3 months. Amber was already showing signs of malnutrition, and Claire's own health was deteriorating from the stress and irregular meals. Meanwhile, at St. Mary's Hospital, the emergency transfusion was proceeding better than anyone had dared hope. Amber sat perfectly still as the needle drew her precious blood, her eyes fixed on Marcus through the glass partition. "You're being very brave," Nurse Jennifer told her softly. "Most adults would be scared to do what you're doing." "My mama always says that being scared is okay, but being too scared to help someone isn't," Amber replied. "That man looks like he has people who love him and need him to get better. I don't want them to be sad like I am when my mama is sick." Dr. Williams approached with the full blood work results, his expression troubled. The genetic connection was undeniable, but it raised questions that would require delicate handling. He'd already placed a call to Marcus's attorney, knowing that this discovery would need legal verification. "Amber, sweetie, I need to ask you some questions about your family," Dr. Williams said gently. "What's your mama's full name?" "Claire Morrison. She used to be Claire Thompson before she had to change her name for work papers." The doctor nodded, making notes. "And you don't know anything about your father?" Amber shook her head sadly. "Mama says he was a good man who couldn't stay with us. She doesn't like to talk about it because it makes her cry. I think maybe he died because sometimes at night I hear her talking to heaven about him." The small amount of blood they were able to safely draw from Amber proved to be exactly what Marcus needed to stabilize until the larger supply arrived from Metropolitan General. As his color slowly improved and his vital signs strengthened, Dr. Williams couldn't shake the feeling that they were witnessing something far beyond medical science. Security guard Patterson had retreated after Dr. Williams's stern reprimand, but he kept watching Amber with suspicious eyes. In his mind, people like her were trouble waiting to happen, and he'd seen enough sob stories to know that bleeding hearts like Dr. Williams always got taken advantage of. As the afternoon wore on, Marcus began to regain consciousness. The first thing he saw was a small blonde child sitting in a chair nearby, a band-aid on her arm and a look of concern on her face that reminded him painfully of someone he couldn't quite place. "Who?" His voice was barely a whisper. "This is Amber," Dr. Williams explained carefully. "She's the little girl who helped save your life today. Her blood type matched yours exactly, and she volunteered to help when we were running critically low on supply." Marcus tried to focus on the child's face. There was something about her features, something that tugged at a memory he couldn't quite grasp. "Thank you," he managed to say. Amber smiled shyly. "You're welcome, mister. I hope you feel better soon." It was then that Marcus noticed her clothes, the worn fabric, the 2 small shoes, the way she seemed to fold into herself as if apologizing for taking up space. This child who had saved his life was clearly living in poverty. "Where are your parents?" he asked softly. "My mama is looking for help at the assistance office. We've been staying in our car because we don't have enough money for an apartment right now. But Mama says things will get better soon." The innocent hope in her voice broke something in Marcus's chest. Dr. Williams watched the interaction carefully. He'd been in medicine long enough to know that some meetings were orchestrated by forces beyond human understanding. The probability of this particular child being in this particular place at exactly the right moment, with exactly the right blood type and genetic connection, defied statistical possibility. As evening approached, Claire finally returned to the hospital, having spent the day being shuffled between various agencies with little to show for it. She found Amber in the pediatric ward, being monitored after her donation, and nearly collapsed with relief at seeing her daughter safe. "Baby, what happened?" "The security guard called and said you were here, but he wouldn't tell me why." Claire's voice cracked with exhaustion and worry. Before Amber could answer, Dr. Williams approached them both. "Mrs. Morrison, I'm Dr. Williams. Your daughter is an absolute hero today. She quite literally helped save a man's life." As he explained the day's events, Claire felt the world shifting beneath her feet. The description of the patient, the timeline, the genetic markers, pieces of a puzzle she'd never thought to solve, began clicking into place. Could I see him?" Claire asked, her voice trembling. "The man she helped?" "Indeed." The walk down the hospital corridor felt like a journey through time for Claire. Each step brought back fragments of that night 7 years ago, laughter over shared stories, eyes that seemed to understand her loneliness, a connection that felt deeper than the alcohol should have allowed. She'd thought about that stranger countless times over the years, especially when Amber smiled in a way that reminded her of someone she couldn't quite remember. Dr. Williams led them to Marcus's room, where he was now sitting up, his color much improved, though still weak. When Claire appeared in the doorway, both she and Marcus froze as recognition hit them like lightning. "Claire," Marcus's voice was barely audible. "Claire Thompson." Her hand flew to her mouth. "Tommy!" The nickname slipped out before she could stop it. That's what he'd told her to call him that night, saying his real name was too formal for new friends. "No," Marcus said softly, understanding dawning in his eyes. "Tommy was my brother. Thomas. You knew Thomas." The room fell silent, except for the quiet beeping of medical equipment. Claire sank into the chair beside Marcus's bed, her mind reeling. "Your brother, is he?" "He died 3 years ago. Car accident." Marcus studied her face, seeing echoes of his brother in her features, understanding finally why Amber had seemed so familiar. "You're saying that Amber is Thomas's daughter," Claire whispered, tears streaming down her face. "I never knew his real name. We only spent 1 night together, and we were both. It was a difficult time for both of us. When I found out I was pregnant, I tried to find him, but I only knew his first name and that he worked in business. I never thought." Marcus looked through the glass partition at Amber, who was colouring in a book that one of the nurses had given her. The resemblance to Thomas was undeniable now that he was looking for it. The shape of her eyes, the way she tilted her head when concentrating, even the stubborn set of her jaw when she was determined. "She's my niece," Marcus said in wonder, "my brother's daughter, the only family I have left in the world." Dr. Williams cleared his throat gently. "The genetic testing confirms the relationship. There's no doubt that Amber is Thomas Blackwood's daughter." "Blackwood?" Claire's eyes widened. She'd heard that name before, on business news, in the financial sections of newspapers she couldn't afford to buy. "You're Marcus Blackwood? The billionaire?" Marcus nodded, his attention still focused on Amber. "Which means Amber is a Blackwood too. She's entitled to Thomas's inheritance, money that's been sitting in trust for years because we never knew he had a child." The implications hit Claire like a tsunami. Her daughter, her beautiful, brave daughter who had been accused of stealing food scraps just hours ago, was heir to a fortune beyond imagination. "I don't want your money," Claire said quickly, her pride flaring. "I know how this must look. A poor woman with a child suddenly claiming to be related to a wealthy family. But I swear to you, I had no idea who you were when Amber helped you today. Marcus held up a weak hand. Claire, look at me. Look. Do you really think what happened today was coincidence? Your daughter, my niece, happened to be in this exact hospital at the exact moment I needed her specific blood type, with the exact genetic markers to prove she's family. She saved my life and revealed a truth we all needed to know. He paused, his voice growing stronger. Thomas left a considerable inheritance in trust, waiting for any children he might have had. He always hoped he'd find you again, you know. He kept a business card from O'Malley's pub for years. I found it in his things after he died, and never understood why until now. Claire gasped. O'Malley's, that's where we met. He kept something from that night too? He never forgot you, Claire. He just couldn't remember enough to find you. Marcus's eyes filled with tears. But somehow, against all odds, his daughter found me instead. As if sensing the importance of the moment, Amber chose that instant to look up from her coloring. She saw her mother crying and immediately became concerned, sliding off her chair and hurrying to the doorway. Mama, are you sad? Did I do something wrong by helping the nice man? Claire knelt down and pulled her daughter into her arms. No, baby, you did something wonderful, something that changed everything for us. Marcus watched the embrace, thinking of his brother who would never get to hold his daughter. Amber, sweetheart, would you come here for a moment? I have something important to tell you. Amber approached his bedside cautiously. Marcus took her small hand in his much larger one, marveling at how delicate yet strong she was. Do you know what family means, Amber? It's people who love each other even when things are hard, she said solemnly. That's exactly right. Well, it turns out that you and I are family. I'm your uncle, your daddy's brother. Amber's eyes grew wide. I have a daddy. Then, more quietly, I remember a nice man who used to visit sometimes when I was little. Mama said he went to heaven. Marcus felt his heart constrict. Yes, sweetheart, that was your daddy. He loved you very much, but he died in an accident when you were 3. And because you're his little girl, that makes you my family too. Does that mean we don't have to sleep in the car anymore? Amber asked, with the practical directness of a child who'd learned to worry about such things too early. Marcus felt his heart break and heal simultaneously. No, sweetheart. You and your mama will never have to worry about having a safe place to sleep again. I promise you that. Doctor. Williams had quietly stepped out to give the family privacy, but also to make some necessary phone calls. This situation would require careful legal handling, but the medical evidence was ironclad. He'd also decided to have a conversation with Security Officer Patterson about compassion and recognizing that people in desperate situations weren't automatically criminals. As the evening deepened, the 3 of them sat together in Marcus's room. A wealthy businessman, a struggling single mother, and a 7-year-old girl whose act of pure kindness had revealed truths that would reshape all their lives. Outside, the storm that had been threatening all day finally broke. But inside the hospital room, something beautiful was being born from the ashes of loss and hardship. There's something else you should know, Marcus said to Claire as Amber dozed in her chair, exhausted from the day's events. Thomas left specific instructions in his will. If he ever had children, he wanted them raised with love, not just wealth. He wanted them to understand the value of kindness and helping others. Claire smiled through her tears. She already knows that. She learned it from living without much, but always sharing what little we had. Marcus nodded. Marcus. Then she's already everything Thomas would have wanted his daughter to be. We just need to make sure she never loses that beautiful heart, no matter how much her circumstances change. As the hospital settled into its nighttime rhythm, none of them noticed how the storm outside seemed to calm into a gentle rain, or how the lights in the room seemed to pulse with an almost heartbeat-like rhythm. Some moments are too sacred for coincidence, too perfect for chance, too beautiful for anything but grace. An hour later, Dr. Williams returned with a manila folder thick with documents. I've spoken with the hospital's legal department and contacted Marcus's attorney. Given the medical evidence and the circumstances, we need to establish proper documentation for Amber's inheritance rights. Claire shifted uncomfortably. This is all happening so fast. Yesterday we were homeless, and now you're talking about inheritances worth millions. Actually, Marcus said quietly, it's considerably more than millions. Thomas's trust fund has been growing for years. Combined with his share of our family business and investments, we're looking at approximately $47 million. The number hung in the air like something impossible to comprehend. Claire felt dizzy, gripping the arm of her chair. 47 million? That can't be real. It's very real, Marcus assured her. But more importantly, there are instructions Thomas left about how he wanted any children of his to be raised. He was adamant that wealth should never replace values, that his children should understand struggle and compassion. Amber stirred in her sleep, murmuring something about sharing crackers. Marcus smiled softly, recognizing the innate generosity that would have made his brother proud. I have a proposal, Marcus continued. Rather than overwhelming Amber with sudden wealth, we create a gradual transition. You and Amber come stay at my estate, not as guests but as family. There's a beautiful cottage on the property that would be perfect for you both. Amber can attend the local school, make friends, have a normal childhood, while slowly understanding her new circumstances. Claire's eyes filled with tears again. You'd do that? Let us live with you? Claire, you're raising my brother's child. You've kept her kind and brave despite having nothing. You've done what Thomas would have wanted, raised a daughter who sees someone in need and offers to help, even when she has so little herself. Marcus's voice grew thick with emotion. I should be thanking you. Dr. Williams cleared his throat. There's something else we need to discuss. Word of what happened today is going to spread. A homeless child saving a billionaire's life and discovering she's his heir. The media will be relentless once they catch wind of this story. Marcus nodded grimly. We'll need to be careful about Amber's privacy. I can have my security team ensure you both are protected from media intrusion while we establish the legal documentation. Indeed, what kind of documentation? Claire asked. DNA testing to legally confirm paternity, trust fund transfers, custody arrangements. Though I want to be clear, Claire, I'm not trying to take Amber away from you. You're her mother, and that will never change. I just want to ensure she has everything Thomas intended for his children. Amber woke up then, blinking sleepily at the adults around her. Are you all still talking about the family thing? Yes, sweetheart, Claire said, stroking her daughter's hair. Uncle Marcus was telling us about some changes that might happen in our lives. Good changes? Amber asked with the wariness of a child who'd learned that change often meant loss. Very good changes, Marcus promised. Would you like to hear about the place where you and your mama might come to live? Amber nodded, climbing into Claire's lap, despite being almost too big for it, a habit that provided comfort to both mother and daughter. Well, there's a beautiful house with a big garden where you could plant flowers if you wanted. There's a library with more books than you could read in a whole year, and a kitchen where we could bake cookies together. And, Marcus paused dramatically, there's a tire swing hanging from the biggest oak tree you've ever seen. A tire swing? Amber's eyes lit up. I've always wanted to try a tire swing. Could Mama push me on it? Of course she could. And I could too once I'm feeling better. Dr. Williams smiled at the interaction. Speaking of feeling better, Marcus, your recovery has been remarkable. The transfusion worked perfectly, and your blood work is stabilizing faster than we expected. I'd say another day or two of observation, and you'll be ready to go home. Hear that, Amber? Marcus said. Your gift saved my life completely. I didn't give you a present, Amber said, confused. Yes, you did. You gave me your blood, which was the most precious gift anyone could give, but more than that, you gave me family. Before today, I was alone in the world. Now I have a niece who's brave and kind, and I have the chance to honor my brother's memory by taking care of his little girl. Claire watched the exchange with wonder. Her daughter, who had been seen as a burden and a thief just this morning, was now being celebrated as a hero and cherished as family. The transformation felt surreal. I need to ask you something difficult, Marcus said to Claire. Are you prepared for how dramatically your lives are going to change? Wealth brings opportunities, but it also brings challenges. People will treat you differently, want things from you. Amber will need to learn to navigate a world where not everyone's intentions are pure. Claire considered this seriously. All I've ever wanted was for Amber to have opportunities. Good schools, healthcare, the chance to pursue her dreams without worrying about basic survival. If that comes with challenges, we'll face them together. And I'll help you both learn to handle it all, Marcus promised. Thomas and I grew up with money, but we also understood its responsibilities. I want to teach Amber that privilege means using your advantages to help others, not just to make yourself comfortable. Amber had been listening intently, though much of the conversation was beyond her full understanding. Uncle Marcus, will I still be able to help people like I helped you today? I hope you'll help even more people, sweetheart. Having resources means you can do bigger things to make the world better, like making sure other kids don't have to sleep in cars. Marcus felt his breath catch. This child, not even 8 years old, was already thinking beyond herself. Exactly like that. A soft knock on the door interrupted them. Nurse Jennifer peeked in. I'm sorry to interrupt, but Mr. Blackwood, there are several reporters in the lobby asking about the story of a child donor saving your life. They don't have names yet, but they're fishing, Marcus finished. It's fine, Jennifer. We expected this. He turned to Claire and Amber. This is what I meant about media attention. We need to get you both somewhere safe while we handle the legal aspects of this situation. I can arrange for you to stay in our family suites tonight, Dr. Williams offered. They're private and secure, and it will give us time to coordinate with Marcus's security team for tomorrow. As the practical arrangements were being made, Amber climbed down from her mother's lap and approached Marcus's bedside. Uncle Marcus, can I ask you something about my daddy? Of course, sweetheart. Do you think he would be happy about what happened today? About me helping you and us finding each other? Marcus felt tears prick his eyes. Amber, I think your daddy would be so proud of you that his heart would nearly burst with joy. You did exactly what he would have done. You saw someone who needed help, and you helped them, even though it was scary, and you didn't know what would happen. Good, Amber said with satisfaction, because I want him to be proud of me, even if I can't meet him until I go to heaven someday. The simple wisdom and acceptance in her words left all three adults momentarily speechless. Here was a child who had lived with poverty and uncertainty, yet possessed a clarity about love and family that many adults never achieved. Your daddy is proud of you, Claire said softly, and I think somehow he helped guide you to Uncle Marcus today. I do. As the evening deepened into night, the small family began planning for a future none of them could have imagined that morning. Outside, the gentle rain continued, washing the city clean and preparing the way for tomorrow's new beginning. Security Officer Patterson, meanwhile, sat in the break room writing his incident report, struggling with how to explain the day's events. In 30 years of security work, he'd never been so wrong about someone. The little thief he'd tried to arrest had turned out to be an angel in disguise, and the experience had shaken his faith in his own judgment. Maybe it was time to start seeing people as more than just potential problems. In her cottage across town, Mrs. Henderson, the elderly woman who sometimes gave Amber day-old bread from her porch, felt an unexpected sense of peace wash over her as she prepared for bed. She'd been worried about the little blonde girl who always said thank you so politely. But tonight, for reasons she couldn't explain, she knew everything was going to be all right. And in the intensive care unit of St. Mary's Hospital, 3 people who had been strangers that morning fell asleep as family, while the universe seemed to hum with quiet satisfaction at a plan perfectly executed. 3 weeks later, Amber stood at the enormous bay window of Rosewood Cottage, watching the morning sun dance across the manicured grounds of the Blackwood estate. The cottage, which Claire had initially thought was impossibly grand, now felt like home. With its cozy fireplaces, built-in bookshelves, and the promised tire swing visible through the kitchen window, it was everything a little girl could dream of. "Mama, look!" Amber called excitedly. "Uncle Marcus is walking to the main house without his cane today." Claire joined her daughter at the window, smiling as she watched Marcus stride confidently across the stone pathway. His recovery had been remarkable, and the doctors attributed it not just to the timely transfusion, but to his renewed sense of purpose. Having family to live for had given him a strength that medicine alone couldn't provide. The past few weeks had been a whirlwind of changes. Amber was enrolled at Willowbrook Academy, a prestigious private school where her classmates had no idea of her recent transformation from homeless to heiress. She'd made fast friends with a girl named Sophie Chen, whose parents were diplomats, and a boy named Jake Martinez, whose father was a local veterinarian. "The school counselor wants to meet with us today," Claire said, settling into the window seat beside Amber. "Mrs. Patterson says you've been asking some very mature questions about charity work and helping homeless families." Amber nodded seriously. "I told her about sleeping in our car, and she got really sad. I think she wants to help other kids who don't have houses. Can we do that, Mama? Can we help them like Uncle Marcus helps us?" Before Claire could answer, a gentle knock came at the cottage door. Marcus entered with his usual morning smile, carrying a newspaper and looking slightly troubled. "Good morning, my favorite ladies," he said, though his cheerful tone seemed forced. "Amber, how did your math test go yesterday?" "I got 100%, Amber announced proudly. "Miss Rodriguez says I'm really good with numbers. Maybe I can help you with your business someday." Marcus's smile became genuine. "I'd love that, sweetheart. In fact, I've been thinking about setting up a special foundation, and I might need a very smart 7-year-old to help me run it." Claire noticed the newspaper in his hands. "Is everything all right? You seem worried about something." Marcus hesitated, then placed the paper on the coffee table. The headline read, "Blackwood, Ear Mystery, Billionaire's Secret Niece, Surfaces After Hospital Drama." "They found us," he said simply. "Someone at the hospital leaked the story. No names yet, but they have enough details that it's only a matter of time." Claire felt her stomach drop. "What does this mean for Amber, for her safety?" "It means we need to be more careful. I've increased security around the estate, and I think it's time we had a serious conversation about how to handle public attention." Marcus sat down across from them. "Amber, sweetheart, remember how we talked about how having money means some people might want to be your friend for the wrong reasons?" Amber nodded solemnly. "You said some people might pretend to like me, just because I have money now, instead of liking me for who I am." "That's right. Well, there are also people called reporters who want to write stories about our family. Some of them are nice and tell the truth, but others might try to make up stories or bother you at school. Like the mean security man at the hospital who thought I was a thief?" Amber asked. "Exactly like that. Like, they might make assumptions about you without really knowing who you are." Marcus leaned forward. "So, we need to teach you how to handle these situations." Claire reached for her daughter's hand. The most important thing is that you never talk to strangers about our family or where we live. If anyone approaches you at school or anywhere else asking questions, you come find Mama or Uncle Marcus right away." "Okay," Amber said, then brightened. "But can I still tell people about the tire swing? Because it's really, really fun." Marcus laughed despite his concerns. "Yes, you can definitely talk about the tire swing." Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Margaret Sinclair, Marcus's longtime attorney and family friend. She was a sharp woman in her 50s who had helped the Blackwood family navigate legal matters for over 2 decades. "Marcus, we have a problem," she said without preamble, then noticed Amber. "Oh, hello there, sweetheart. You must be the famous Amber I've heard so much about." "I'm not famous," Amber protested. "I'm just regular." "And that's exactly what makes you special," Margaret said warmly, then turned back to Marcus. "We need to talk privately." Marcus glanced at Claire and Amber. "Why don't you two go try out that new art set we bought yesterday? I'll join you in a few minutes." Once they were alone, Margaret's expression grew serious. "It's worse than just media attention, Marcus. I received a call this morning from someone claiming to be Thomas's former business partner. He's alleging that Thomas owed him money when he died, and he wants to contest Amber's inheritance." Marcus felt his blood pressure spike. What former business partner? Thomas never mentioned any significant business partnerships outside of our family company. "His name is Vincent Crawford. He claims he and Thomas were developing some kind of technology startup together, and that Thomas invested Crawford's money without permission. He's demanding 50% of Thomas's estate. That's impossible. I handled all of Thomas's business affairs after he died. There was never any mention of this Crawford person." Margaret nodded grimly. "I've already started investigating, but Marcus, Crawford clearly has inside information. Someone at the hospital leaked details about the genetic testing and Amber's situation. If this goes to court, it could tie up Amber's inheritance for years. And worse, it would mean extensive media coverage and scrutiny of the family." The thought of Amber being dragged through a legal battle made Marcus feel sick. "What do we know about this Crawford character?" "Not much yet, but what I've found isn't encouraging. He's been involved in several questionable business dealings, and he has a history of targeting wealthy families with dubious claims. The timing of his emergence right after the story leaked is highly suspicious." Through the window, Marcus could see Amber and Claire in the garden, laughing as they tried to paint butterflies on canvas. The sight of their happiness made his protective instincts flare. "What are our options? We fight it, obviously. But Crawford knows that even a baseless lawsuit could drag on for months, generating negative publicity and putting stress on your family. He's probably hoping you'll pay him off to make him go away." "Then he doesn't know me very well," Marcus said grimly. "No one threatens my family." Margaret smiled approvingly. "That's what I was hoping you'd say. But Marcus, this could get ugly. Are Claire and Amber prepared for that level of scrutiny?" Before Marcus could answer, Amber burst through the cottage door, her face glowing with excitement. "Uncle Marcus, Mama painted the most beautiful butterfly, and I painted the tire swing. Come see." Looking at his niece's joyful expression, Marcus made a decision that would shape everything that followed. "Margaret, do whatever it takes to protect my family, and I mean whatever it takes." As the afternoon progressed, Marcus struggled with whether to tell Claire about Crawford's threat. She'd been through so much already, and things had finally stabilized for her and Amber, but he also knew that secrets had a way of surfacing at the worst possible moments. That evening, after Amber had gone to bed, Marcus found Claire sitting on the cottage's front porch, looking up at the stars. "Penny for your thoughts," he said, settling into the chair beside her. "I keep waiting for the other shoe to drop," Claire admitted. "Everything has been so perfect these past few weeks. It almost feels too good to be true. Marcus's heart sank. He'd hoped to have more time before reality intruded on their newfound happiness. "Claire, there's something I need to tell you." The serious tone of his voice made her turn to look at him. "What's wrong?" "Someone is trying to challenge Amber's inheritance. A man claiming to be Thomas's former business partner." Claire felt the familiar knot of anxiety return to her stomach. "Is his claim legitimate?" "I don't believe so. But that doesn't mean he can't cause problems for us." Marcus reached over and took her hand. "I want you to know that regardless of what happens, you and Amber will always have a home here. The cottage is yours, and I'll make sure you're both taken care of no matter what any court decides about the inheritance." "That's not what I'm worried about," Claire said quietly. "I'm worried about Amber. She's finally feeling secure, finally believing that good things can happen to her. If this becomes a big legal battle, it won't touch her," Marcus promised. "I'll make sure of that." But even as he spoke the words, Marcus wondered if that was a promise he could keep. Vincent Crawford had already proven himself willing to target a child's inheritance. There was no telling how far he might go. Inside the cottage, Amber lay in her new bed, surrounded by stuffed animals and books, listening to the soft murmur of adult conversation from the porch. She didn't understand all the words, but she could hear the worry in the voices of the two people she loved most in the world. Closing her eyes, she whispered a prayer to the daddy she'd never met. "If you're watching, please help Uncle Marcus and Mama not be scared. And please don't let the bad people take away our new family." Outside, the wind rustled through the oak tree that held her tire swing, almost as if someone was listening. The next morning brought crisis in a form none of them had anticipated. Claire was preparing breakfast when her phone rang, an unknown number with a local area code. "Mrs. Morrison, this is Detective Sarah Chen with the Metropolitan Police Department. We need to speak with you about your daughter Amber immediately." Claire's blood ran cold. "What about my daughter? Is she safe? She's right here with me." "Ma'am, we've received a report alleging child endangerment and suspicious circumstances regarding Amber's living situation. We need to conduct an immediate welfare check." The phone slipped from Claire's trembling hands. Marcus, who had arrived for their usual breakfast together, picked it up. "This is Marcus Blackwood. What exactly are you alleging?" "Sir, we've received information suggesting that this child was coerced into a medical procedure under questionable circumstances, and that her current living arrangement may not be in her best interests. We need to verify her safety and well-being." Marcus felt rage building in his chest. "Detective Chen, this is clearly a malicious report. Who filed this complaint?" "I'm not at liberty to discuss that, sir. We'll be arriving within the hour to conduct our investigation." After the call ended, Marcus immediately contacted Margaret Sinclair, who confirmed his worst fears. "Vincent Crawford filed the report," she said grimly. "He's claiming that you and Claire conspired to exploit Amber's medical situation for financial gain, and that the child is being kept in isolation to prevent her from revealing the truth." "That's completely insane," Marcus said, his voice shaking with fury. "Of course it is, but Crawford knows that Child Protective Services has to investigate every report, no matter how obviously fabricated. He's trying to create chaos and negative publicity while positioning himself as someone concerned about Amber's welfare." Claire had been listening to the conversation with growing horror. "Can they take her away from me? Not permanently, not based on false allegations," Margaret assured her, "but they can place her in temporary protective custody while they investigate, especially if Crawford has manufactured any evidence to support his claims." Amber appeared in the kitchen doorway, drawn by the distressed voices. "Mama, why are you crying? Did something bad happen?" Claire knelt down and pulled her daughter into her arms, trying to compose herself. "Some confused people think we might need help taking care of you, baby. They're going to come talk to us today to make sure you're happy and safe." "But I am happy and safe," Amber said, puzzled. I have you and Uncle Marcus and my new school and the tire swing. Why would people think I need help?" Marcus crouched down beside them. "Sometimes, sweetheart, when people want to hurt a family, they tell lies to try to make trouble. The people coming today are good people who want to protect children, but someone told them lies about us. The same kind of lies the security man believed about me stealing food." "Exactly like that," Marcus confirmed. "But just like before, the truth will win in the end." An hour later, Detective Chen arrived with a Child Protective Services worker named Dr. Amanda Foster. They were professional but thorough, interviewing Amber separately from Claire and Marcus, examining the cottage and reviewing medical records from the hospital. Dr. Foster, a kind woman in her 40s with extensive experience in child welfare, quickly recognized that Amber was a well-adjusted, happy child living in a loving environment. But protocol required a complete investigation. "Amber, I need to ask you some questions about how you've been living here," Dr. Foster said gently. "Has anyone ever made you do anything that scared you or made you uncomfortable?" "No," Amber replied honestly. "Everyone here is really nice to me. Mama lets me pick what I want for breakfast every day, and Uncle Marcus taught me how to use the tire swing safely." "What about the day at the hospital when you gave blood? Did anyone force you to do that?" Amber's eyes grew wide. "Oh no, I asked if I could help the sick man. Nobody made me do it. The doctor man said I was very brave." "And do you like living here? Do you miss your old home?" "I miss some things," Amber said thoughtfully. "I miss Mrs. Henderson, who used to give me bread. But I don't miss being hungry or sleeping in the car when it was cold, and now I have Uncle Marcus, who's my family." Dr. Foster was experienced enough to recognize genuine happiness when she saw it. This child showed no signs of distress, manipulation, or fear. If anything, she seemed more confident and secure than many children from traditional backgrounds. Meanwhile, Detective Chen was interviewing Marcus and Claire separately, looking for inconsistencies in their stories. But the facts were simple and verifiable. Amber had volunteered to help a dying man, tests had revealed a family connection, and a loving family had been reunited. "Mr. Blackwood," Detective Chen said, "the person who filed this report claims you're exploiting this situation for publicity purposes. How do you respond to that?" "Detective, if I wanted publicity, do you think I'd be working so hard to keep my family out of the media spotlight? I've increased security specifically to protect Amber's privacy. The last thing I want is attention." "And the financial aspects? The inheritance? Thomas left money in trust for any children he might have had. Amber is his biological daughter, confirmed by genetic testing. She's entitled to that inheritance regardless of whether she ever met me or not." Dr. Foster rejoined them after completing her evaluation. "Detective Chen, I need to speak with you privately." Outside the cottage, Dr. Foster delivered her assessment. "This is a loving, stable family environment. The child shows no signs of distress, abuse, or manipulation. In fact, she appears to be thriving. Whoever filed this report either has false information or malicious intent." Detective Chen nodded. "I've reached the same conclusion. The medical records support their version of events, and there's no evidence of wrongdoing." But as they prepared to close the investigation, Vincent Crawford himself arrived at the estate gates, accompanied by a news crew from Channel 7 News. "This is exactly what I was afraid of," Crawford announced to the camera. "A vulnerable child being hidden away from scrutiny while powerful people manipulate her situation for their own gain. The public has a right to know what's really happening to this little girl." Marcus watched the scene from his security office, his hands clenched into fists. Crawford was a man in his late 50s, with the polished appearance of someone who made his living charming people out of their money. The way he positioned himself as Amber's protector while trying to steal her inheritance made Marcus sick. "Sir," His head of security said, "Should we let them onto the property?" "Absolutely not. But call our media relations firm. If Crawford wants to play games in the press, we'll be ready for him." Dr. Foster and Detective Chen observed the media circus from inside the cottage. "I've seen this before," Dr. Foster said grimly. "Someone's trying to use the child welfare system to harass this family." "Can you recommend that the case be closed immediately?" Detective Chen asked. "I'll file my report today stating that there are no grounds for concern and recommending immediate case closure," Dr. Foster confirmed, but the damage was already being done. Crawford's press conference was being broadcast live, with headlines like "Billionaire's Mysterious Niece," "Child Welfare Concerns," scrolling across news websites. Amber, unaware of the media storm brewing outside, was showing Dr. Foster her art supplies when she suddenly asked, "Dr. Foster, what happens to kids who don't have mamas and uncles to take care of them?" "There are special places and special families who help take care of them until they can find permanent homes," Dr. Foster explained. "That's what I want to do when I grow up," Amber announced. "I want to help kids who don't have families, like Uncle Marcus helped me and Mama." Dr. Foster felt her heart warm. This child, who was being portrayed in the media as a victim, was already thinking about how to help others. It was clear that whatever family dynamics existed here, they were raising a compassionate, generous child. As the afternoon wore on, Marcus made a decision that would change everything. He called Margaret Sinclair and his media team. "Set up a press conference for tomorrow morning," he told them. "It's time to tell our story properly, before Crawford's lies take root." "Marcus, are you sure?" Margaret asked. "Once you go public, there's no going back to privacy. Crawford has already destroyed our privacy. Now I need to protect my family's reputation and Amber's future." Marcus looked out at the cottage where Claire was helping Amber with her homework. "Besides, I think it's time the world meets the real Amber Blackwood." That evening, as the family sat together for dinner, Marcus explained his decision. "I know we wanted to keep things private, but sometimes you have to fight fire with fire." Claire looked worried. "Are you sure Amber is ready for that kind of attention?" "I'm ready, Mama," Amber said with the quiet confidence that had characterized her since the hospital. "I want people to know the truth about our family." As night fell over Rosewood Estate, the three of them sat on the cottage porch, preparing for a battle that would test their newfound bonds. But they faced it together, as families should. In his hotel room across town, Vincent Crawford was already planning his next move, unaware that he had just awakened a sleeping giant who would stop at nothing to protect his family. The next morning dawned clear and bright, as if the universe was preparing a perfect stage for truth to triumph over deception. Marcus stood at the podium in the grand ballroom of the Blackwood Foundation headquarters, facing a room packed with reporters, cameras, and curious onlookers. Behind him, a large screen displayed a photo of Thomas Blackwood, the brother whose memory had brought this moment to life. Claire sat in the front row, holding Amber's hand tightly. They had spent the early morning rehearsing what might happen, preparing Amber for the questions and attention that would follow. But looking at her daughter now, Claire realized that Amber possessed a natural poise that couldn't be taught. "Ladies and gentlemen," Marcus began, his voice carrying the authority of a man who had built an empire, but the warmth of someone speaking about family. 3 weeks ago, I lay dying in a hospital bed, saved by the courage of a 7-year-old girl who had every reason to look out for only herself, but chose instead to help a stranger." He paused, letting his eyes find Amber in the crowd. She gave him a small wave, which drew chuckles from the assembled media. "That little girl is my niece, Amber Blackwood, the daughter my brother Thomas never knew he had, but would have loved beyond measure. Today, I want to tell you her story, not because we seek publicity, but because someone is trying to use lies and legal manipulation to harm an innocent child." Marcus clicked a remote, and the screen behind him showed a timeline of events. The night Thomas and Claire met, Thomas's death 3 years ago, Amber's act of heroism at the hospital, and the subsequent discovery of their family connection. Vincent Crawford, who claims to be my brother's business partner, has filed false reports with Child Protective Services and is attempting to contest a 7-year-old's inheritance with fabricated claims. Yesterday, he brought news cameras to our home, while investigators were ensuring my niece's safety and well-being. In the back of the room, Crawford shifted uncomfortably as cameras turned toward him. He hadn't expected Marcus to go on the offensive so aggressively. Dr. Amanda Foster from Child Protective Services completed her investigation yesterday, Marcus continued. I'll read from her official report. This is an exemplary family environment. The child shows clear signs of being loved, protected, and well cared for. There are no grounds for concern regarding her welfare or safety. The room buzzed with whispers. Marcus raised his hand for silence. But this isn't just about legal battles or inheritance disputes. This is about who Amber really is. He gestured toward his niece. Amber, would you like to come up here and tell everyone about your foundation idea? Amber looked up at her mother, who nodded encouragingly. With careful steps, she approached the podium, which Marcus lowered to her height. Hi, she said into the microphone, her voice clear despite her nervousness. My name is Amber and I'm 7 years old. Before I met Uncle Marcus, my mama and I didn't have a house, and sometimes we were really hungry. The room fell completely silent. Even the most cynical reporters found themselves leaning forward. I know there are other kids who are hungry too, and who don't have safe places to sleep. So Uncle Marcus and I are starting something called the Thomas Blackwood Foundation for Children. We're going to help kids who don't have families, and kids whose families need help with food and houses. She paused, looking around the room with the earnest expression of someone much older than her years. I gave Uncle Marcus some of my blood when he was sick, but that's not the most important thing. The most important thing is that we found each other, and now we can help other people find their families too. When she finished speaking, the room erupted in applause. Even Crawford looked uncomfortable as reporters began asking pointed questions about his claims against such a clearly articulate and genuine child. Margaret Sinclair stepped forward with a box of documents. We have complete medical records, genetic testing results and testimonials from every hospital staff member present during Mr. Blackwood's treatment. We also have evidence that Mr. Crawford never had any business relationship with Thomas Blackwood and has made similar false claims against other wealthy families. Crawford stood up abruptly. This is a carefully orchestrated performance designed to... Mr. Crawford, interrupted investigative reporter Janet Morrison from the Washington Herald. Our research team has discovered that you've filed similar inheritance disputes against 3 other families in the past 5 years. All were settled out of court. How do you explain this pattern? The room turned to Crawford, who suddenly looked far less confident than he had moments before. Dr. Foster, who had been invited to attend the press conference, stood up from her seat. As the child welfare investigator assigned to this case, I want to state unequivocally that Amber Blackwood is one of the most well-adjusted, happy children I've encountered in 15 years of social work. Anyone suggesting otherwise either has false information or ulterior motives. The tide in the room had clearly turned. Questions flew at Crawford, who found himself backed into a corner as reporters discovered the holes in his story in real time. But the most powerful moment came when a reporter asked Amber directly, "Sweetheart, some people are saying that your uncle might be taking advantage of you. How do you feel about that?" Amber looked puzzled. "Taking advantage of me? Uncle Marcus gave me and Mama a beautiful house to live in, and he's helping me start a foundation to help other kids. He reads me bedtime stories and pushes me on the tire swing. How is that taking advantage? Her innocent confusion at the very concept that Marcus might be exploiting her was more convincing than any legal document could have been. As the press conference concluded, Crawford slipped out of the room, his legal threat effectively dismantled by the truth and his own greed exposed to public scrutiny. Later that afternoon, Margaret Sinclair received a call from Crawford's attorney. He was withdrawing all claims and would issue a public apology in exchange for the Blackwood family not pursuing criminal charges for filing false reports. "It's over," Margaret told Marcus as they watched Amber and Claire playing in the garden from the cottage porch. "Crawford's backing down completely." Marcus nodded, but his attention was focused on his family. "You know, Margaret, winning was never really the point. The point was protecting them and honoring Thomas's memory." "Speaking of honoring Thomas," Margaret said with a smile, "the foundation paperwork is ready. The Thomas Blackwood Foundation for Children will officially launch next month with Amber as its youngest board member." That evening, the three of them sat together on the cottage porch, as they had so many times before. But tonight felt different, final in a way. The threats were gone, the legal battles won, and their family was officially and publicly recognized. "Mama," Amber said as she curled up between Claire and Marcus, "do you think Daddy knows about everything that happened?" Claire looked up at the stars beginning to appear in the darkening sky. "I think he knows, baby. I think he's been watching over us this whole time." "I think so too," Marcus added. "I think he guided you to that hospital at exactly the right moment, not just to save my life, but to bring our family together." Amber considered this solemnly. "Then I guess even when people die, they can still help their families." The people we love never really leave us," Claire said softly. "They live on in the good things we do and the love we share." As if responding to her words, a gentle breeze rustled through the oak tree, setting the tire swing in motion. The three of them watched it sway in the twilight, each lost in their own thoughts about the miraculous chain of events that had brought them together. 6 months later, the Thomas Blackwood Foundation had already helped reunite 12 children with family members and provided housing assistance to over 200 families. Amber, now 8 years old and thriving at Willowbrook Academy, spent her weekends visiting the Foundation's programs, always carrying crackers in her pockets to share with children who reminded her of her former self. Marcus had discovered that having family gave his business success deeper meaning. He found himself making decisions not just for profit, but for the kind of world he wanted Amber to inherit. Claire had enrolled in college, pursuing a degree in social work so she could better help the foundation serve families in crisis. She often told people that her daughter had taught her that even in the darkest moments, angels could appear in the most unexpected forms. Vincent Crawford had disappeared from public view after his scheme collapsed, but his actions had inadvertently led to positive changes. New protections were put in place to prevent frivolous challenges to children's inheritances, and the publicity around Amber's story had inspired dozens of other reunion stories between families separated by circumstance. On the first anniversary of their meeting at the hospital, Marcus, Claire and Amber returned to visit the staff who had witnessed their miracle. Dr. Williams presented Amber with a special award for Youngest Hospital Hero, and even former security officer Patterson, who had undergone his own transformation, was there to apologize personally and celebrate the little girl who had taught him about the danger of judging people by their circumstances. As they drove home that evening, Amber asked, "Uncle Marcus, do you think we'll have more family adventures?" Marcus caught Claire's eye in the rearview mirror and smiled. "I think, sweetheart, that our biggest adventure is just beginning." "Nern, Behind them, the hospital grew smaller in the distance, but the miracle that had started there continued to ripple outward, touching lives in ways they would never fully know. Sometimes, the smallest acts of courage create the biggest changes, and sometimes the universe really does conspire to bring families together. In the end, it wasn't about the money or the inheritance or even the legal battles. It was about a 7-year-old girl who saw someone in need and chose to help, unknowingly fulfilling a destiny that had been waiting for her since the day she was born. The little angel had found her way home, and in doing so had created a family that would help countless other angels find theirs.